Hey, what's up, guys? It's Bakes here, and thank you for joining me for this episode of my random horror reviews. I just want to say a quick sorry in advance if my voice sounds fucked up. That's because it is. I've got a bit of a cold at the moment, so I'm very nasally, eyes watering, and I'm pretty drained from work just in general, so you might need to bear with me a couple times in this review, but either way, let's get into it. Today's movie is one that I feel like a lot of people do know about now because it is just such a bizarre, strange film. So it has a lot of people, bring it up in conversation. So without delaying any longer, a film from 2014 directed by Kevin Smith. The movie is titled Tusk. So getting into the plot for this one first, for those who haven't seen this movie, or maybe those who have seen it but need a refresher. We have our main character in this movie, Wallace, who is played by Justin Long, and he's a podcaster. He has this podcast with his friend, and what they do on this podcast is pretty much just make fun of people and exploit people for comedy's sake and everything. They're not very good people, to be completely honest, especially Wallace. But he's making this trip from America to Canada to interview this kid who is playing with a samurai sword and cut off his own leg. It's not a big part of the story, but that's why he's going to Canada. But when he gets there, it turns out that the kid has actually killed himself, I guess from bullying and whatever. But he's bummed that he doesn't have this interview anymore, so now he's trying to find someone else to interview while he's up there so it's not a waste of time. He's in the bathroom of this pub, and up on the wall there's a note from this old man saying that he's had this very adventurous life and he has plenty of stories to tell. He's been lost at sea before, and it's sort of rambling on and everything, but Wallace goes, perfect opportunity for an interview. So he meets up with this old man played by Michael Parks, and he meets him in like his mansion off in the woods and whatever. He ends up getting drugged, of course, and I might as well not beat around the bush. He gets turned into a human walrus. So yeah, that's pretty much the plot for this movie. I thought I might as well cut straight to the chase. So hard movie to sort of pick where to start with because it really is such a strange and weird film. Just hearing what this movie is about, I feel like most people fall down two different trains of thought. Firstly, people thinking that it's ridiculous and that it's probably a dark comedy, while the second are probably thinking that it's deeply disturbing and really fucked up and a body horror film. And it really is actually both of them because, to be honest, they are correct. Either way they think about it, yes, this movie is fucked up and disturbing, and to be honest, there are actually moments that are really depressing as well. But then you also have to be pretty checked out to not realize that it's a dark comedy also. Maybe if you didn't get the humor the first time around, I'm guessing that it was your first time watching it and only time watching it because you may have got distracted by the more disturbing factors in this one, but there is a lot of comedic moments in this one as well. But the story alone walks this line of being ridiculous and bizarre while also being super dark and disturbing. So this is going to be an interesting one to get into, 2014's Tusk. So for a movie like Tusk, if you've never seen it before, you might sort of have the expectation of this being a movie where the performances are overall kind of weak, it hasn't got a very well-rounded cast, and you might have those expectations because of the subject matter of this movie. It's someone getting turned into a human walrus. It's very bizarre, very strange, very out there. But no, actually, it's quite well-rounded in both parts. Even the production overall is genuinely solid, but getting back to the cast and performances for now, like I said, you have our lead played by Justin Long, you have Haley Joel Osment, you have Michael Parks, you have fucking Johnny Depp in this movie. I almost forgot, but Johnny Depp plays a character in this movie, and it's a significant part. Like, it's not just a cameo, like, he plays a pretty well-rounded character who's in the film for long enough. But like I said, the cast and performances are genuinely solid in this movie. But the performance that I do want to start with, in particular, is Michael Parks, who plays our villain in this movie, because there are parts where he is batshit over the top insane, but then there are other parts where it's a lot more subtle, and it's like genuinely terrifying. Like, he's a creepy motherfucker at times in this movie, and the part where he's reminiscing on stories and relaying them onto Wallace, Justin Long's character, during the part where they're talking and doing this interview for the podcast and whatever, it's so fucking engaging while also being like terrifying. Just the way he talks, it's so creepy, and you know that Wallace is in a fucking corner and he doesn't know it yet. It's so fucking good. But what I like about not just Michael Park's performances, but everyone's performances in this movie, is everyone is all committed to the part. As in, Justin Long commits to being a walrus and wearing this big fucking suit and crawling around on all fours. Michael Parks commits to being a crazy fucking lunatic. Johnny Depp is Johnny Depp, and he just goes full character in whatever he does. So, I don't need to go too deep into that. But the cast and the performances from the cast, everyone goes all the way in, and it's actually genuinely solid. Getting into Justin Long's character Wallace, our lead in this movie, because I feel like there actually is a lot to break down with his character. But firstly, Justin Long himself is such a likable actor, and I feel like he's the perfect example of someone who can play a douchebag, but still be really likable and enjoyable to watch on screen. Like another example, if anyone saw the movie from last year, It's a Wonderful Knife, he played such a cunt in that movie, but he was still so fucking likable and so funny. Like, I already loved It's a Wonderful Knife, but he took it up another level. Just his character was so fucking funny and engaging. And it's the same in Barbarian, actually. He plays such a fuck in that movie too. But again, just he was so funny and engaging, and I feel like that's such a rare quality to come by. Someone who can be a massive douchebag, but they're still likable, and you want to follow their character and sort of see them, get through whatever they're going through. And it's the same thing here. Wallace is not a good person. He cheats on his girlfriend. He changes his character for fame. But most of all, he exploits people for content. But yet, when he is turned into a walrus, you still feel so fucking bad for him. Like, the way that he is turned into a walrus in this movie, it's gotta be a fate worse than death. Like, I swear it's gotta be. Like, it is super fucked up. But just to reiterate, even before he's turned into a walrus, he's still likable even through all of his faults. And that's what a actor like Justin Long can bring to a character like Wallace. Because you sort of don't want to be in a movie like this where it's like, you're following our main character and you're like, nah, this guy's a douche, and you're following him the whole time around. Yes, he's a douche, but he's fucking likable, and that's what Justin Long can bring. That's what I'm trying to say. But once again, you know that he's fucked, even when he is first drugged, and then he's slowly modified, and he's slowly being turned into a walrus. It just becomes so much worse, and like I said earlier, Justin Long really does commit to the part. Like, once he's turned into a walrus, he doesn't speak anymore, he screams, he's on all fours. I can imagine the days on set were just very physically tolling for him, and a lot mentally as well. But like I said, he commits, he does such a great job, and I wanted to give him his flowers for that as well. Now, changing topics to Wallace actually becoming a walrus, because if you haven't seen this movie, you probably do have expectations of what it's going to be like. Now, like I said earlier, when you hear the plot, it's probably equally ridiculous and disturbing to hear. And I find it the same when you actually do look at Wallace once he becomes a walrus, because it's a fucking human walrus. It is so fucking dumb and so what the fuck that you do have to chuckle, because it is just so bizarre. There's nothing else you really can do. You do kind of laugh, though to be fair, it equally freaks me out. I'm very much on both sides of the coin. When he is first revealed as a walrus in all of its glory, because like I said, it's sort of a slow process of physical modifications to become a walrus. Like, it's not just like he's a walrus. Like, you see his body being operated on, and slowly over time he becomes a walrus. But once he is revealed as a walrus in like this grand, all in his glory sort of reveal, it does sort of take me back, if I'm being honest. Now, not only does it disturb me, but something about it also kind of grosses me out and kind of makes me feel sick. And it's more than just the body modification and body horror element to this movie, but I can't quite put my finger on what else sort of makes me feel a little bit grossed out by it. It's got to be a mix of like the suit, because it's made of like human skin, how he's treated like an animal, the way he cries, like obviously he is just fucking out of his mind, so he's like crying, he's drooling, something about that just makes me feel a little bit sick as well. Him being fed raw fish, it's just all really gross. This might sound weird, because I feel like most people would side on the Human Centipede being more gross, and I'm talking about the first Human Centipede movie, because I've said this before, the first movie, Human Centipede movie, actually isn't that bad. I feel like a lot of people's expectations for that first movie is actually what the second Human Centipede is. But the first movie, looking at the Human Centipede, I'm equally as disgusted looking at that as I am looking at Wallace as a walrus. I know that might be controversial. A lot of people would lean on the side of the Human Centipede. But honestly, I find them both to be just as disturbing and gross. And it might sound weird, but equally amused as well, because like I said, looking at a human as a walrus, you do have to just chuckle because it's so fucking ridiculous. And call me a sick fuck, but I do kind of chuckle as well looking at the Human Centipede in the first movie, because it is just so insane you have to laugh. Like, I feel like that's the only thing you can do. Now, if you are watching this movie for the first time and you've gotten through the first half of the movie okay, I feel like most people would be divided by the introduction of Johnny Depp's character in the second half of this movie. He plays this former detective who's been tracking our antagonist for a few years now. He's got this thick accent, and he really plays into the more ridiculous side of the film rather than the horror aspect of it. I feel like his part would divide people, firstly, because it divides me. I've seen this movie a few times now, maybe like 4 or 5 times, and I'm still not sure how I feel about it. But it does bring a lot more direct on the nose comedy and tone wise, and I can see that taking a lot of people out of this movie. The second half of the movie in general feels fairly different from the first, because in the second half we start taking a lot more time following Wallace's friends who are trying to find him, and following Johnny Depp's character, and there are even moments of flashbacks that eat up a lot of the time through the second half of the movie, where the first half was a lot more structured in my opinion, tone-wise a lot more consistent, and we also get a lot more of the strongest elements of this movie being Justin Long and Michael Park's characters, and I'm not throwing shade at any of the other actors and their performances or anything, but Justin Long and Michael Parks, like I said, the way that they commit in this movie, and it's a film about a human being turned into a walrus. I've said that so many times. They probably don't need to go as hard as they do, but they smash it out of the park. And like I said, you get most of that through the first half of this movie. Now, this might actually surprise a lot of people, but this movie does have a message and some things that it's trying to say with a bit of substance to it. And like I said, that might surprise a lot of people just because of what this movie is about. But like I was saying before, Wallace is not a good person. He's a douchebag. His whole thing is exploiting people for content, for fame, for money. That's his shtick. And the whole reason he goes to Canada in the first place, I know I went through this in the introduction, but the whole reason he goes to Canada in the first place is to pretty much make fun of this kid who cut off his own leg on video playing with a samurai sword. But once he gets there, the kid has committed suicide, and instead of feeling bad for the kid and feeling bad for what he's doing, he feels bad for himself, because there goes his content, there goes his thing to point and laugh at pretty much. Now, after the events of this movie and him becoming a walrus, he is now the story. Wallace is now the content to exploit. Wallace has become something that once upon a time he would have set out to make money off and laugh at someone else's misfortune. It's become a full circle journey. Wallace is now the content, and there is a bit of a message in that if you care to read into it that deep. It also does try to talk about, the question, what separates man from animal, but it's not as pushed on you as the themes of exploitation and what is going on with Wallace. But while I'm on the topic of the ending, I mentioned earlier that this movie is like low-key depressing, and I do want to bring up this part. However, it's a spoiler to do with the ending of this movie, so if you don't want the ending spoiled for you, click out of the video now, but I'm coming towards the end of this review, so I might as well say it. The end of this movie, Wallace's friends do find him. By this part of the film, Michael Parks's villain is dead. Wallace has killed him, but they find Wallace. He's still a walrus in the basement of this guy's house. It skips forward a year later, and they have left Wallace in a zoo to be a walrus for the rest of his life. And it sort of brings up the question, Wallace is now just too animal, he's tapped into his inner walrus, he's not human anymore. Bruh, is that not the most depressing thing ever? Because Wallace is fucking crying, like, That is the worst thing ever. Like, I know someone who watched this movie and they said the thing that turned them off the movie the most was the ending because it was just too depressing, it was too fucked up. Why would you not try and save your friend from being a walrus? But it does play into the ridiculous part of it as well. It is kind of funny, but it is fucked up. It is so depressing, disturbing. But I did want to get into that as well because I think that is worth mentioning. So to wrap up my thoughts of this movie, the film is surprisingly good for maybe what you would expect just because of what the movie's about. But like I said, the cast, their performances, everything on a technical standpoint is really solid. Justin Long and Michael Parks in particular, like I said before, they do a much better job than what I feel like they probably could have done for a movie like this. Like, they could have just phoned it in and been like, yeah, but they genuinely smash it out of the park. Justin Long is an actor I pretty much want to see in everything, so I want to see him do more horror stuff, of course. I feel like he's an underrated horror actor. Michael Parks, I believe, has passed away. Apologies if he's still alive and kicking, but I'm pretty sure he's passed away now. The story in this one is okay, but because it is so different, it's worth checking out just on that alone. Tonally, especially in the second half, it's a little bit off, but worth sticking around if you feel like being depressed by the ending and, you know, you want to feel deeply sorry for someone's situation. Sure, stay around for the ending. What else? A great use of Fleetwood Mac's song Tusk. Very on the nose, but good job there. I'm going to give this one a 7 out of 10. Like, Tusk is fairly enjoyable, you know, deeply disturbing while also being ridiculous. But it is one that a lot of people talk about, so if you've seen Tusk and you want to share your opinion on it, feel free to let me know your thoughts on the movie in the comments below. But thank you for joining me for this episode. Again, guys, I'm sorry that I was so nasally, and my voice is annoying enough when I'm healthy, but, you know, when I'm sick, I'm sure it's a fucking pain. I feel like shit. There was so many times I had to cut because I just went on a sneezing fit and everything, but thank you for sticking around. Hopefully you enjoyed this review. And like I said, if you've seen the movie before, let me know your thoughts on it. And this is a very, as I said, bizarre movie. So if you haven't seen it before, please go and check it out and then come back and let me know what you think, because that's just worth hearing alone. You know, I want to hear people's first time opinions on a movie like this. So thank you again for joining me, guys, and I'll see you for another video soon. Peace.